let's get back to the idea of common stuff that I found.
Let's see.
Let's not go there.
Try to do that Jim Carrey quote again. Let's see that.
Alrighty then.
You know, Puerto Rico's sun is shining. Our birds are singing. Life is good.
Same here. The birds are singing. The sun is shining in Victoria, but it's like 9 degrees Celsius. So
it's 79 here.
But it could be worse. It could be raining. You know how the Pacific Northwest is, right? Like if it's from November to like May, if it gets sunny, everyone goes outside, right? Yeah. So that's the way it goes. Hey, good to see you, man. Thanks so much for taking the time.
I don't take this lightly. Thank you for having me on. Much appreciated. Looking forward to rocking the mic with you.
It's going to be great. The book, we're just going to get right into it. We're not going to waste any time. No busy time, just right into productive time. I see it. It looks awesome. I love the cover.
Yeah.
The Common Path to Uncommon Success, a roadmap to financial freedom and fulfillment. I got to say, right out of the gate, one of the first things that stood out to me when I was going through the book was the length of time that each of your daily podcasts were going to be. You on the regular. You had like, I want to do this based on the avatar, Jimmy, your avatar. But you also had some flexibility built into that as well, right? Like if you had a Tony Robbins or say, like a Seth Godin, who's been on this show as well, episode 343, put a link to that in the show notes as well. But it leads me to the idea of when you're going through the book and there's the 17 steps, right? The 17 steps of the Common Path. How important was it for you to, obviously the path is there, but there's putting flexibility in that once you've got that path. How important is it to have that so that you're not going to deviate from it necessarily, but it's not going to feel like restraining or, constrained by it?
I'm a big believer in Parkinson's law. Tasks will expand to the time allotted. I wanted to make sure, absolutely, that I was able to dive right in, get right down to business, be productive, produce the right content, serve my avatar in the best manner possible. But at the same time, like you said, hey, I think each interview needs to be as long as each interview needs to be. Like I get that comment all the time from people in Podcasters Paradise. John, how long should my podcast be? Should it be 26 minutes and 30 seconds because that's the average commute time? I'm like, no, your podcast should be exactly as long as it's awesomely valuable for your listener. If that's 37 minutes, it's 37 minutes. If your guest sucks and it should be 11 minutes, it should be 11 minutes. That's the focus.
Perfect. And I feel the same way. That's why, depending on who it is, depending on how it goes, yeah, it's organic. Like
we're going to talk for 7 hours today.
No, we're not going to talk for 7 hours. No. Although it is my listening day. We're going to talk about theming your time in a bit, because I know that you guys are big on that as well. It's really important to have that distinction between simple and easy, isn't it? You illustrate that in the book. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why people need to understand that it's not easy, but simple is the key.
Listen, building a business is hard work. Running a successful podcast is hard work. Generating revenue in this world, it's hard work. But you know what's also hard? Being broke. Living paycheck to paycheck, like not being able to support those that you love, like waking up every day and doing something that's miserable. So my call to action for that specific question is like, choose your hard. Like it's hard to launch this daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs, but it's also hard to not do it and to keep living a mediocre life that I was miserable in doing. And I just chose my hard. So that's what I want your listeners to do, is to think about that and then just choose their hard. And now getting back to the process. Now listen, there are people out there that want you to think that the path to success is complicated. It's scary. It's hidden. But here's the key for $1,997.97. Like, here's the key to success. That's not the way it has to be. Because listen, I've interviewed over 3,000 successful entrepreneurs. I've boiled down the 17 foundational, fundamental principles that they all share in common. And that's what this 17-step roadmap is. And that's exactly what this common path to uncommon success is. It's a common path. It's a simple path. We have all trod upon it who have achieved uncommon success. It's not easy.
Right.
Like I said, it's flipping hard, but it's simple. It's clear. And that is what's the beauty of this, is that it doesn't take Einstein. Although I do love Albert Einstein, my favorite quote.
You can see the quote right there.
I didn't even see that, man. That is some rough penmanship right there. Whoa. Okay.
It's chalk. I'm still learning to do the sketchnoting in chalk. But yeah, it's that quote that you mentioned in the book. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, you'll see it.
You're a pro. You're a pro, brother. Mike the Pro Vardy. I love this. But listen, it's not easy. It's hard to do what we do. But the path is not a hidden path. It's not a secret path. It's not a complicated path. It is a simple, clear, direct path. Here's the 17 steps. Own it, do it, put in the work, make it happen.
And it's like that Jim Carrey speech where he talks about how his dad really wanted to do what he loved to do. So but he decided to do something he didn't enjoy doing, which led to, he was not happy. And he's like, well, if you're going to be unhappy doing something that you might as well be happy doing something. If life is hard anyway, right? So you might as well be going. And
you really butchered that, by the way.
I did. I butchered the hell out of it.
That was bad. I actually read that commencement speech on my podcast, but even having done that, I couldn't do it justice. So instead of butchering it for a second time, I'm just going to let it
go. Let's get back to the idea of common stuff that I found.
Let's
not go there.
Try to do that Jim Carrey quote again. Let's see that.
Alrighty then.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah. I was listening to an episode of Rich Roll's podcast where he's talking to Jedediah Jenkins. It just came out not too long ago. I linked it in the show notes. This episode's going to come out well in advance of the book coming out. I'm pushing this up because you've got some bonuses that we want to get to. You're the best.
I really appreciate that.
So Jedediah was talking to Rich about law school. And then I went through your book. I'm going through your book. I'm like, wait a minute. What is the common thread between law school being the place? Because they both are like, it wasn't, they realized like, I'm out of it.
That's the common thread.
It seems to be like, it's like the default, like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I better go to law school. Or I'm going to go to law school.
Because guess what? Everybody's like, ooh, John's in law school. My grandson's in law school. My son's going to law school. Like, oh, my college roommate's going to law school. Like it's some impressive thing. And like, that's why you do it. That's why, everybody that doesn't have a clue what they're doing, they're like, oh, I'm going to go back to school. Yeah. Why don't you go get more debt to get a useless degree to keep doing nothing? Like that's what they should be saying.
Yeah. And I've had that thought several times over the years. When things get hard, that's when that idea comes to mind, right? Like, I didn't go to post-secondary education. I went from high school basically to Costco for 12 years.
I wish I did.
Right. So and I have no student loan debt, but there's the time where you get those biases that show up like, well, if you had a degree, then this would happen. And this would happen. I'm like, no, that is a signal to me that what I'm about to do is hard.
1996 called, they want their degree back.
One thing I wanted to get into right away was the idea of the exercises that you have smattered throughout the book. And I love that because it's the doing that happens. So how important was it for you to say, I can't just talk about, we got to put some exercises in there. And you've also got some models in there, like your own stuff, how you did things. Why was that integral to putting, making this book what it was?
So to really make this 17-step process work, I knew that each step had to be broken into 3 sections. Mm-hmm. And the first section is that it's the exercise, it's the explaining, it's the how, it's getting you there to understanding why this is such an important step, how to accomplish the step, the exercises, the templates to make it happen. Section 2 is then how I actually personally applied this step in my journey. So you get a real world example. And then section 3, I sat down and I said, okay, I've interviewed 3,000 of the world's most successful entrepreneurs. Who best exemplifies this step of everybody that I've interviewed? Let me ask them to come on and contribute what they think of this step, how they recommend people acquire and achieve this step. And let's add that in as well. So you're getting 3 amazing sections with every single one of these steps. You're getting the how, the what, the exercise, my explanation, and plus my application, and then somebody else's application and explanation. That's, by the way, an all-star entrepreneur. I only went after the A players.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I want to get to a little bit later is the idea of relationships, because that is also something that's prevalent throughout the course of the book. When I was getting ready for our conversation, I listened to you and Michael O'Neill chat on the Solopreneur podcast, which is great because I haven't chatted with Michael in a while. I avoided talking to him when the Bengals were having a losing season. And whenever we get together, it's always like,
yeah, the Steelers were like undefeated at that point too. So that wasn't good.
Yeah. But one of the things that helped me kind of prepare for this was this idea as I was listening to it while I was going for a walk. You know, I take these walks to start off my day now and walks to end my day. They kind of like are the bookends, right? And you like, again, there's a theme. I went for a run. I went for a stroll. I'm seeing that for you, like just to get the juices flowing. And that's when this quote that you might be able to read showed up when you were listening to a series of podcasts. You can share the quote for sure. We'll get to that. But I also want to know, when you loaded up that iPod Nano, what were some of the podcasts that you were listening to? Like, what were the ones that kind of like, you know, these are the ones that are going to kind of stoke the fires?
So I was listening to Pat Flynn, Smart Passive Income. I was listening to Andrew Warner's Mixergy. I was listening to David Simon Garland's Rise to the Top. Those were like the interview business podcasts that I was listening to. I was also always listening to Planet Money and Freakonomics. Those were two shows that I was always listening to as well, which, by the way, I still listen to those two podcasts today. I love those shows.
Try not to become a person of success, but rather a person of value. That's the quote that if you're watching this on YouTube, you see this there.
You know that I actually made Albert Einstein less of a sexist, because the real quote is try not to become a man of success, but rather a man of value. And I couldn't keep saying it, especially like when there was female hosts. I just couldn't say it that way because he is an idiot for putting it in that way. And I do believe in equality and all that jazz. So I put the word person in, and I think I literally have tipped the scales. So everybody thinks it's a person of value. And Albert, you sexist pig.
Well, I mean, our national anthem in Canada for the longest time was All Thy Sons Command. And then they changed to All of Us Command recently, not too long ago. Like I'm thinking in the last 5 years. So when my kids sing nationally, it's been very recent. So I remember we're at like hockey games, right? Because of course, Canada, we go to hockey games. We're singing the national anthem, and you can kind of see people flub it, right? Like, you know, in all thy sons, I mean, I of us command, like they can't quite, it's so ingrained, right? But the reason I bring this up is that when I chatted with Brian Tracy on the podcast, he actually stuck around after. It was really weird. I know when I do interviews and we have conversations, and I know we're going to have this same situation today. Yeah, that's normally what happens. But Brian was like, can I share one more thing with you before I go? And I'm like, you're Brian Tracy. You're like one of my mentors, you know, like this is a big deal. He goes, the key to success is helping others. Everything, like that's the key. And this book, what you've done is you've created this roadmap, and I've read my fair share of entrepreneurial books. I've read, and blog posts and all that stuff. The 17 steps, it like you said, it's a common path. It's simple, but you lay it out. And what I love about it too is that people can go back and revisit steps that they might have missed. Like I know it's integral to go in order, right? Like, I mean, that you see that, and I know that's important, but the great thing is that it's something that people can turn back to again and again and again to either validate their idea, or even if they're not an entrepreneur and they're like, how do I can take the 17-step process and apply it to the work that I do in a company or in my life. And that I think is really valuable, because there's stuff in there that when you start to peel away at it, you're like, oh, this can work here, not just in an entrepreneurial sense, right?
Yes. And this 17 steps is meant to be, like you said, in that order, because there will be people that pick up this book and they're like, okay, table of contents, boom, I'm at step 11. I'm going to go right to step 11 and go forward from here. And you're missing the point, because listen, there are leaks in your ship. There are leaks in all of our ships. You need to go back, start at step 1, chapter 1, and you're going to have 3 things happen to you. Number 1, you're going to say, okay, I actually did crush this step. Good to know. Cha-ching, let me move on. Or 2, there's some tweaks and some pivots that I actually now can see that I need to make here to really solidify this step. Okay, now I can move forward. Or 3, like, whoa, I really got this wrong. Let me go back to the drawing board here, wipe the slate clean, and actually get it right for the first time in my life. And you're going to have one of those 3 reactions at every single step. So let's get the 17-step process down right. Go through this once chronologically, get to step 17, which is, by the way, keep the money you make, which so few people in this world know how to do. And then you'll be off to the races.
Well, and what I also love is that the way you've structured each chapter with those 3 parts, like you mentioned, you could either go, I need to go back to the first step, or what did John do? Or what did Leslie say? What did,
Right.
Omar and Nicole say? Like,
Yeah.
so it's not like you have to go, okay, I'm going to go through this whole thing again. Like, let me model what Ramit said about, holding on to your, like, let me look at that as well. Let's talk about relationships for a second. Let's talk about the mentorship relationship. Now, you and I haven't spent a lot of time hanging out together, but we've crossed paths multiple times at different events. And as I was reading the book and going through different things, I'm like, oh, I was at Blog World in oh, I was at oh, the last time John and I saw each other was on the aircraft carrier at Social Media Marketing World a couple of years ago. So we travel in the same circles, but we've never really had a chance to hang out. But I do know that we have common relationships. And one of those is Jamie Masters, formerly known as Tardy, which is how her and I actually connected, because Tardy and Vardy rhymed. I also was doing time management. Tardy is another word for being late. We kind of played on that for a bit, but she was your mentor when things got started. And you tell that story throughout the book, but I also want to know, like, who else are you looking to at? Like, you don't just have one mentor, right? You're looking at mentors in different areas of your life, as well as you go through your business cycle, you're bringing in other relationships in as well, right?
Anything that I want to improve on in life, I get a mentor. And there's a very simple process to getting a mentor that everybody gets wrong. You need to find somebody who is currently where you want to be in life. Those are your possible mentors. Nobody else is. Only the person who wants to be who is currently at where you want to be in life. So guess what? My virtual trainer is really flipping fit. He is in good shape, because that's where I want to be in life. Guess what? Back when I hired Lewis Howes to be my mentor, he was great at doing live webinars. That's what I wanted to become great at. So every time I've wanted to become great at something, I've hired somebody who was great at that thing. And they taught me how to get there, because they knew the tips, the tricks, the shortcuts, the potholes to avoid, all those different things. And so guess what? Jamie Masters was a successful business podcast host. I wanted to be a successful business podcast host. She got me there. She opened up the Rolodex. She opened up the network. She guided me on the steps. She put my feet to the fire. I'll never forget. We're having a conversation like this on a video call. And she's like, all right, interview me. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you're going to interview people, interview me. And I was just like floored, shocked. And then I was like, okay. And then I went and interviewed her, and she's like, do you see how bad you are? Like, do you see how not ready you are to interview people? You need to practice. You need to hone your craft. And I'm like, oh my God, I was about to interview like Michael Hyatt tomorrow. I'm terrible. Like, and she saved me. Like, that's what a mentor will do.
I want to get into the idea of the planning and the actual making of the content, because one of the things that was recommended that you don't do from people was do a daily podcast. They thought, you're going to burn out. And by the way, from afar, people who didn't know you were like, daily podcast? Because I've been doing podcasting for a little while at that point. I'm like, that seems like a recipe for burnout. But you landed it. And then what I think is fascinating beyond that is that you took that and you structured it in a way that allowed you to avoid that burnout, that that lack of excitement that can happen when you're doing something, consistently. So for someone that's listening right now, that's like, I want to do this thing, but I don't want to burn out. But I know I love doing this. And it's that big idea that you talk about in the first section. And they've gone through all those other steps, and they're getting to the point where like, okay, I'm ready, but how do I make it so that I don't fizzle out, as opposed to, make inroads? What are some of the things that you think they can do that you did that can keep them from hitting that basic obstacle that can derail them on an ongoing basis?
So number one, you've got to batch like a baller. You've got to be willing and able to batch like a baller. So did I wake up every day and have to be like, okay, get your game face on. You're doing one interview today. You're editing one interview today. You're uploading one interview today. No, I woke up one day per week and I did 8 back-to-back interviews. And by the time the sun set that night, 8 interviews were done. And then I had 6 days to recoup, recover, work on other parts of my business, do what had to be done. After I did those 8 interviews, that was my Super Bowl. You know,
Yeah.
I know the Bengals can't quite comprehend that, but that was my Super Bowl. As a Patriots fan, I could comprehend that pretty easily.
You can.
That
Yeah.
was my Super Bowl. And I just, put on my Tom Brady jersey once a week and I just showed up and I played the game. And I brought my energy, I brought my attitude, I brought my mentality, I had my setup, everything was good, and I got it done. And I could not have woken up every day and feel like I wanted to do an interview. There would have been days I would have been like, that's the last thing I want to do. But because I batched like a baller, I was able to make it happen. I was able to get ahead of the game, stay ahead of the game, bring my A game every single time that I could, and just make it happen because I batched like a baller. So I theme my days.
Yep.
I know you theme your days. You're all about listening today. That's so key. Like, that's how I wrote this book, by the way. I wrote this book because the first 2 hours, every single day, I just wrote nothing else. I didn't do anything else before I wrote these 2 hours. And there was 480 hours over 8 months that I was able to accumulate by just doing 2 hours of writing a day as the first thing that I did. And that allowed me to complete this book on time, on schedule, and make it happen with the best 2 hours of my day, which is the first 2 hours of my day. And I did that because I themed every day for me. And I couldn't write for 5 hours a day. I couldn't write, I couldn't wake up and say, you got to write 10,000 words today. I was capping out at 500 to 1,000 words. That's all I wanted to get to. But because I gave myself 8 months to do it and I did it every single day, I wrote 71,000 words, 273 pages in 8 months, not overnight, not over a weekend, over 8 months. And to me, this is why this book is the best book it can be, because I knew what my strengths were and I followed that and I made it happen.
Yeah. And the voice is there, everything, the tone, like again, it feels like you're having a conversation. The best kind of books that I love having read and experiencing, because that's what they are, is when you feel like, oh, John's talking to me. We're having a coffee, we're having a beer, whatever. By the way, real quick sidebar. I got somebody who knows I'm a Bengals fan, and Jeff, by the way, who we just alluded to, the train from Cincy, he's a Bengals fan. So that's one of our nobody in this meme got sent to me. Nobody in human history has ever sent a text message about the Bengals winning a playoff game, not just a Super Bowl, because the Bengals' last playoff one was in 1991 and the first text message was in 1992.
Oh my God.
Yes. Ouch! So there's a discipline to being a Bengals fan, and we're going to get into the idea of discipline and focus, because I know that word really resonates with you in a minute here. But I want to talk about this idea of AARs, right? The idea of you bring
after
it up,
action reviews.
Yes. You bring it up in the book, and this is where it comes from your military background, right? Like you're training in the military. Can we get into that a bit? Because I think there's a real value there beyond the level of looking at like when you're going to review your content, but I think it goes well beyond that. And I think people can, if someone listening to this, like, you know what, I'm not building a business necessarily, but I do need to look back at what I've done and make sure I'm, going on the right path. Can we talk about that a bit? Because that really stood out to me as something like, hey, this works for anybody.
There's a reason why the United States military is the best military in the world. I mean, let's be honest. Canada's a close second, but there's a reason why.
We're very lucky that we have you next door. Let's put it that way.
And honestly, we're lucky to have you guys as allies. I mean, it was great serving with the Canadian soldiers in Iraq. I mean, you guys are a very well-trained crew for obvious reasons. And there's a reason, though, why the U.S. Army is the best army in the world. It's because we have the best training, but most importantly, we have the best reviewing, which means after every single training, we don't just disperse off. We have the AARs, the after action reviews, where everybody sits down and we go through every single step in the process, everything that went right, everything that went wrong, everything that could have been done otherwise. And before you know it, every single thing that could have happened, you understand, has been played out in your mind. So the next time you go on a mission, like something different is going to happen, but you've already walked and talked through it. So you know what step you need to take because you've gone through the after action reviews enough time. And that's one thing I realized when I first started as an entrepreneur. I'm like, wait a second, you just launched this thing, or you just put this out in the world, or you just did X or Y or Z, and you didn't have an after action review. And they're like, what? I'm like, no, we're just looking forward, charging forward, just like always look forward, always do things and fast and break it and do all that stuff. I'm like, well, what about doing a look back and like seeing what went right so you can do more of that, what went wrong so you can do less of that, and just overall, just, learn from what's going to happen in the future again, because guess what? History repeats itself. That's just the process that we go through. So you're going to have something that looks like that again, probably pretty soon. And so those AARs, those after action reviews, really set me up for success because I applied it to every part of my business. And of course, I brought it in and I applied it to the 17-step roadmap to financial freedom and fulfillment. Another one of those things is backwards planning. It's like having the end goal in mind and then working back from there. And that's exactly what the 17th step was. I'm like, what is actually the thing that people want? Well, on a big, broad, vague picture, people want freedom, Mike. They want freedom to wake up and do what they want to do, where they want to do it, with whom they want to do it with. Okay, so we get that. Everybody wants freedom, period, end of story. But now on the 17-step roadmap, looking down at these 17 core foundational principles that makes up a successful entrepreneur, what's the last step here? Well, it's keeping the money you make. Because you can do all the things right and crush it on every level. And if at the end of the day, you're not keeping the money you make, are you really running a successful business? No. Are you going to be able to keep running your business and doing what you love doing? No, because it takes money to live, whether you like it or not. I mean, Mike hasn't spent any money on Bengals playoff tickets, so he saved some money there. But you still need money to live. Yes. You still need money to live. I mean, there's still milk to buy. There's still chalk to buy. There's still penmanship writing classes to take. I mean, there's a lot of things you can spend money on, and you should spend money on. Specifically you, Mike, you should spend money on penmanship writing classes for sure. But that backwards.
Maybe I'll go to medical school or law school because I believe lawyers and doctors have some of the worst penmanship out there.
Oh man. It's just because they're just such miserable people inside that they just can't help but it coming out through their fingers.
Their gnarled hands and their scrawl.
I'm inside. Yeah. So backwards planning, keep the money you make. And then I worked backwards from there all the way to step one. And then from step one, I said, okay, here's a 17-step roadmap. Let me sit down and write this thing.
Let's get into, before we wrap up, I want to talk about a couple more things. Number one, we talked about Michael Hyatt. We mentioned him. He's been on the episode a couple times, 239 and 289, but one of his favorite words is focus. And focus is
you got it
from you. What does focus mean to you, and why is it so incredibly important as you go through these 17 steps? Why is focus such a key component?
Focus is an acronym for follow one course until success. Focus. If you focus, you actually have a chance. If you don't focus, you're just going to be that little girl screaming into the wind and everybody's going to ignore you and not care, because focus allows you to become great at what you do. Focus allows you to become the best. Focus allows you to create the best solution to a real problem. That's what focus gives you. So many people try to go 1 mile wide and 1 inch deep with all these little micro ideas, and they don't get any traction. They don't make any impact. The people who win go 1 inch wide and 1 mile deep, and they focus like a laser, and they win at a high level as a result. That's what I want for you. I want you to focus as you're going through this book on becoming the best solution to one single problem. That is a theme throughout the book. I start you at chapter 1, which is identifying your big idea. Once we've got that, once we've got your big idea, now we focus on executing every other step in the process to get you to a point where you can be like myself and you can be like, okay, how do I keep the money I make? Don't stay in California because the government takes half my money. I'm coming to Puerto Rico and I get to keep the money I make now because I'm only paying 4% taxes. Life is good now. Boom. 79-degree weather, not 9-degree weather. This is the world that I want to live in, that I'm able to create now. So focus, it's massive. It gives you the gift of becoming the best.
And I think that acronym is key because a lot of people get confused as what focus means. But if you break it down to that acronym, then it's really going to laser things in. Before I let you go, I want to talk about the bonuses that people can get when they pick up the book, because I think that I want people to pre-order the book. Again, as I went through the book, I'm like, there's gold throughout every step, gold at the end, the well of knowledge. That could have been a whole separate book, I think, to a degree. I'm glad you incorporated it in it. But the idea of of having that there was great. But if people want to pick up the book and they want to get the pre-order bonuses and all that stuff, first off, what are those bonuses and where can they go to pick up the book?
Well, first off, we got to say thank you, Gus, for joining the podcast. That is my 1-year-old golden doodle. He's the best.
Oh, nice.
He's been silent all day today, but he's so inspired by you that he had to come up and say hello.
Maybe he's just trying to read my writing.
He's trying to figure it out. But listen, I wanted to make this book an absolute no-brainer. I wanted people to be like, you know what? The book sounds good. I do want the common path to uncommon success. I want my own version of uncommon success. I want to follow the 17-step roadmap to financial freedom and fulfillment. But guess what? Life's busy. You might go off and do something else and forget all about me, and that's okay. But what's not okay is that you're not going to get this gift of financial freedom and fulfillment. And I want you to have that. So I wanted to make it a no-brainer for people to take action right now, not tomorrow, not when the book goes live on March 23rd, but right now, because these 5 bonuses, Mike, they literally, not figuratively, they literally disappear on March 23rd. These are only for pre-order bonuses. That's it. And there's 5. One of them, I'm only going to talk about one of them. I'm shipping all 3 of my journals to the door of every single person who lives in the United States and is not a Cincinnati Bengals fan. If you fit those 2 qualifications, I am shipping all 3 of these journals to your door, literally. If you're outside the US, I'm immediately emailing you the digital pack of all 3 of those journals. They're amazing, amazing journals. And if you're a Bengals fan, I'm going to send you a bag full of coal because that's what you get as a Bengals fan. So I am literally on my own dime. I'm shipping you all 3 of these journals on my dime. I'm losing money on every single pre-order. That's not the point of this book. It's not the point of why I did this. I'm doing this to make it a no-brainer. There's 4 other insane bonuses that you can learn more about if you visit the following URL that we'll talk about in a second. There's also personal endorsements by Gary Vaynerchuk, Seth Godin, Neil Patel, Eric and Mandy, Dory Clark that you can read at your leisure. I have the first chapter waiting for you. You can read it to get my writing style down and to my writing style, my writing style. Yeah, you can read my writing style. Just like you can't read Mike's handwriting.
I was waiting for that. I was waiting for that.
Oh, that's what I call a great mistake of words that I used. And this is also the place that you're going to be able to see all 5 bonuses listed out in detail. There's a video of me jumping in my pool with all my clothes on because that's what I do. And then I describe the details about the book. And you get all of that at uncommonsuccessbook.com. So if you visit uncommonsuccessbook.com, pre-order the book from there, you're going to get all 5 of those bonuses as a gift from me. Again, I described one of them, all of my journals. There's 4 others you can see all the details at. And that's a wrap, brother.
That's great, John. The book is called The Common Path to Uncommon Success, a roadmap to financial freedom and fulfillment. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today on the Productivityist podcast.
Thank you.